Hi everyone, this is Mark White and Dennis Fernandez of White Summers, Kathy and James. We're speaking to you all from the offices of White Space, which is the co-workspace business affiliate of White Summers. You know, it would be a good idea if we all to understand who we are and what our background is, because it gives some sense of context to the topics that we're going to be discussing in the series of blogs, video blogs that we would like to present to all of you. Dennis, you are the head of our IP strategy and consulting business. You've got a great background. You and I have known each other for 20 years. We were both lawyers at Fenwick & West, and then you went on. I think you were a venture partner with Walden Ventures. You have had your own patent prosecution firm, and then you got into innovation strategy and prosecution of your own innovation. So it's sort of a long line of things you've done. Talk about, and I'll tell you what I think would be very interesting. It's not what you did at Fenwick as a patent lawyer. It's why you made the jump to Walden, why Walden would hire a patent lawyer to advise them on their startups and their inventions or investments. You know, what advice were they looking for from you? And what lessons did you learn about how investors look at companies that would be good for companies to know when they're raising money?
Okay, so many years ago when I left Fenwick to join Walden, to become a real investor on the venture capital side, I was a little surprised by that too, because I wasn't a traditional MBA background, but I discovered quickly why they thought that was real. There were a few things where I had an unfair advantage in empowering the venture fund. One was technically I would understand what was going on almost instantly, and I could spot what was not real. Surprisingly, quite often, there's a lot of flaky parts of the narrative and business plans that just didn't make any sense. And I think the partners at Walden were surprised how easily it was for me to see through the fog of that. Okay.
In what respect? I mean, it didn't make sense with respect to the protection of the technology that underpinned the solution, or it just didn't make business sense because companies were building a solution that did not have longevity?
Yes, both of those. Usually it was, the first thing that would trigger in my mind is these things should not work, okay? And so I had almost like a patent examiner's reaction to, that doesn't make any sense. The other part which surprised me was how easily, because of that, I was able to imagine as a potential customer for a brand new market. And I understand why this thing was either going to be a huge hit, regardless of all this noise, or why it didn't make any sense, why anyone would want to buy this thing, okay? And I don't know where that came from, but I had a real early knack of that, and I kind of stuck with it through the years.
So I have a question for you. Companies, when they get funded, they go through diligence. With new investors, there's diligence on markets, on the team, on competitive dynamics, and on the intellectual property. And what I hear you say is the diligence on intellectual property is not just a patent review. It's not just a review of prior art and other competitors and what they may have patents on, but it's more of, does this make sense from a product design, product functionality, sort of product development, evolutionary perspective, where the whole thing is going. I mean, is that right?
That's right. I mean, sometimes it's compelling and everyone would want it, and so that's not the issue.
Okay.
But many times it takes a lot of effort to extract what they want to sell. I remember we ran into this well, I don't know, 10 years ago with some early carbon nanotube startups out of one of the major universities around here. And they could not articulate what the commercial value would be. And we kept hammering at it until finally we came up with a handful of scenarios, but that was never well understood by the founders or the investors. They just hoped that this early technology and science would be monetizable, in a couple decades.
Do you think that examination and that perspective, using intellectual property to sort of define what value the product has, is common and pervasive in venture capital and other firms? Actually, other firms are doing it. So you did it for Walden, but this is, all firms now do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got into the VC industry where, $100 million fund was big. Now that's tiny. Yeah, so at the time, we were relying on each other's instincts to try and make correct risk decisions. And so I didn't have a lot to go on. I had to understand technology, see if it worked, and maybe how it might be patentable.
So I'm trying to figure out the lesson for our entrepreneurs, for our company executive teams on presenting their enterprise to new investors, not existing investors that have bought in already. And is the idea on sort of the discussion on patents and technology to really sort of package the solution in the envelope of having great market longevity because you're on a path where this is the way to build this and other competitors cannot assail that position? So really from a perspective of sort of knocking out your patents or your innovation as being sort of key to the functionality that you offer, is that really the task here?
Yeah, I think you have to communicate clearly a few key takeaways.
Okay.
Well, the first thing is you have to have a pioneering position. So you have to make it clear that you invented this key technology, and it could be fairly small, and that's okay, but you've done everything you can to protect that starting point. And then you explain how that will enable either horizontally a standard or different narrow markets, and how each one of these scenarios, horizontally or vertically, how each of these scenarios are separately protected via different patent claims or other applications in your portfolio. So you have to narrate the portfolio approach to go from the enabling technology to the standard scenario to the competitive activity scenarios. Each one of these scenarios has to be knocked out with a set of patent positions. I think if you do that, you've done everything you're supposed to do.
So would a simplistic way to visualize what you just said be to say you've got enabling technology at your starting point, you've got a target customer, and let's assume that it's a very attractive market and set of customers and you have a way of reaching them. But on the intellectual property diligence question, you're tracking that supply chain of new innovation or technology components all the way through. It may be you inventing this or it's others. You plug into their solution, you get a bigger solution, sort of a subsystems and systems approach. But you're part of this chain, and so you've got to be able to track it all the way to say it's unassailable from a technology perspective, and your ability to really to continue to use your solution without being attacked by another competitor just based on technology. Would that be?
That's right. For example, one of the areas I've spent a lot of time analyzing for this purpose is energy. And I've looked at all kinds of enabling energy in solar and other forms. And so we look at the core position and make sure we're pioneering. We look at what could be the industry platform for building an ecosystem around this new energy solution.
Mhm.
We look at how this will enable different industries to build on top of that.
Mhm.
You'll have devices, you'll have manufacturing methods. Downstream, there'll be secondary industries that support this.
Mhm.
Each one of these emerging business models are potentially patentable. And you could end up with 30, 40 patents very quickly just by thinking through these threads of strategy.
Okay, I'd like to end the discussion here. I do want to talk to you in our next segment about your life as an innovator
Okay.
and inventing your own technology at convergent points and protecting that and prosecuting it and sort of building a separate business and how the world has changed, actually. The patent world has changed in the time we are right now, and how that affects companies in the market today. Thank you all very much.